Hi everyone, today I'm going to be giving you a tour of our cut flower garden in August. We're located in Virginia, Zone 7, and we're pretty far into the summer, so we have a lot of things in bloom right now, but we are also starting to pull some of our earlier stuff out, and we're already getting some stuff into the ground to overwinter throughout the fall for next spring. I usually start on the row on the right, but today I'm going to do the one on the left first because there are more changes that have taken place between this month and last month. In this very first section, we have a bunch of zinnias, and these are the more like specialty zinnias that are really cool colors. We have the lime green envy zinnias, and then we also have queen lime red and queen lime orange. These are not like your typical bright zinnias. They have a much more muted color that I really like, and I really like especially how full the queen lime zinnias are. There are so many layers of petals that make it look really fluffy. Last month these zinnias were just starting to produce, but now they are putting on so many stems and they're really putting on a nice show at the front of the garden, which is really nice. And the last zinnia in this section is the Cinderella Peach one, which I really love. It has kind of like a cupcake shape that I think is really cute. The bugs do seem to like these ones the most though, so I usually have to pick around in there to find some good stems. Next we have this beautiful section of frosted explosion grass, and honestly it's a little hard to see on camera because the stems are just so airy and they just add such a cool touch to bouquets. The majority of this actually is pretty past its prime right now, but if I go underneath I can find a lot of stems that are just starting to open up their little sprays, and that's the point that I like to cut them for bouquets. I'm really happy with how the frosted explosion grass did, but the bunny-tails grass on the other hand was a complete fail. You can see how puny these little plants are, and they are technically starting to flower, but they are just so small. So we'll try again next year. In this next area, I pulled out some stuff that I had earlier and I just seeded in a cover crop. This is a mix of peas and oats. We actually started this flower garden last fall with basically just mulch that we laid on top of our grass, so there really isn't too much like good soil there. So I think that the cover crop will really help to add in some fertility to this garden. Next we have some Dara plants, and I'm kind of surprised that these are flowering so much right now because I thought that they were more of a spring flower, but they're really starting to put on a ton of stems right now. And I really love these stems because they're super long, no foliage on them, so they're really easy to cut for bouquets. They're kind of like a Queen Anne's lace, but with these really pretty purple tones, and they're just really pretty and dainty flowers. I'm pretty impressed with the number of stems each plant has too, because I think I only have like 4 or 5 plants that made it, but each plant has maybe a dozen stems on them. Next to the Dara, we have an area where I had Chinese forget-me-not in the spring, and I cut those all out and again seeded some more of this cover crop mix. Then we have a small patch of Snapdragons, but those are not blooming too much right now, so I'll skip over those. I have just a couple of plants of feverfew. Those flowers are just so cute and button-like, and white is always a great thing to have in bouquets because it can really help ground all of the different colors that your other flowers are. Next we have one of Aaron's favorite flowers. He decided that he really loves this Gomphrena. I have a bright red variety that dries really nice and keeps its color well, so I've been harvesting a lot of these stems and just hanging them upside down in the house to dry. My plan is to make kind of like a colorful fall wreath sometime soon using all flowers from this garden that I've dried. So hopefully that will turn out well and I'll upload that video, and these are going to be the perfect addition. The bright color I think is really going to pop out, and red will be a great color as well for fall. This is another one where I am so impressed with the length and also the number of stems of flowers per plant. The stems are always the longest ones that stick out whenever I make a bouquet of different flowers. Next to the Gomphrena, we have another flower that I've been picking a lot of to dry, and these are straw flowers. And by the way, if you're not into drying flowers, these also just make a really long-lasting fresh flower. If you are looking to dry them, one tip is to pick them when just 1 or 2 layers of those outer petals have opened. So kind of like the ones I'm showing you here. If they're fully opened, like this red one that I'm showing you, they're kind of gonna start getting a little bit brown when you dry them, and they're just not gonna be as nice. I'm really happy with how the ones that have been drying have turned out, and these are going to make another wonderful accent flower for that fall wreath. Then we have a small section of lemon basil, which has all started to flower, and this makes a really wonderful filler flower. The stems are a little shorter than I was hoping for, but I have been cutting them and they do have a really wonderful aroma as well. I have a couple of sweet Annie plants and I've already harvested a little bit of this to dry, but it's put on some new stems that have started blooming and they are so pretty with all of those tiny little yellow flowers. I'm going to come out here later tonight and cut some more of those to dry. These are going to make a really good base for that wreath, and I kind of wish I had more of these, but some of them did die this spring in a late frost. I have a couple of small little celosia plants that are starting to bloom now. These probably would be bigger if the soil was a little bit better, but they are pretty cute in there and I like how vibrant the colors are. And these have been growing really quickly now that our days are super hot. And this is yet another flower that does really well dried and keeps its color. Our section of glads has finished blooming for the year and I'm just leaving this foliage so that it can continue to absorb sunlight and send energy to those corms, because then we can just save those for next year. This year I'm going to experiment with actually leaving those corms in the ground instead of digging them up. We're in zone 7, so we're kind of like on the border of where glads can overwinter, so I'm just going to try it out and see how it goes. We have another large patch of lemon basil here, and again they're just kind of a little shorter than I would have liked. So we're going to move on to another zinnia patch here, and these are the more bright colored zinnias. These are the more common varieties and what most people probably think of when they think of zinnias. Personally, I wouldn't normally gravitate towards these colors, but I have noticed that when I put them in bouquets, they do really pack a punch and it is really nice to have a really bright color. And whenever I give these bouquets to our neighbors, they seem to really like the brightly colored flowers as well. Then we have a patch of cosmos that has probably doubled in size from last month. It has been doing so well in this summer weather. First we have a dark red rubenza cosmos, and I really need to come out here and deadhead because they're starting to slow their production down a little bit because I haven't been cutting those spent flowers off. And then we have a really tall section of seashells cosmos. I'm really impressed with how nicely these flowers have been doing. They are double the size of the rubenza ones, and these cosmos come in a palette of like pastel and soft pinks, which are really pretty and I think works really well with the form of the cosmos. And they also have these really cool fluted petals that are very unique. I know that cosmos are a very common flower, but that doesn't make me love them any less. They have such a perfect, delicate wildflower look to them, and I also really love how the stems kind of have this wiry effect to them because they get all squiggly. And recently I just cut a whole bunch of cosmos all by themselves and put them in a little glass, and it kind of made like its very own art form because of the wild look that all of those stems have. Next we have a section where we've pulled out sunflowers from earlier in the summer and we've planted these with flowers that are going to overwinter, and I actually did that in a recent video if you missed it, but some of the things we have here are foxgloves, straw flowers, and in the back we have a couple of hyssop plants as well. These are all things that should be able to overwinter in our zone, zone 7. By the way, if you're looking for a really good flower for pollinators and bees, we have some of this hyssop blooming in our vegetable garden and the bees are all over it. We still have a couple of our branching sunflowers left in here that I haven't pulled out yet. The foliage is starting to look a little bit sad because we have been getting a lot of rain, and combined with the heat and humidity, that's kind of caused some damage to the plants, but there still are some good flowers there that are continuing to bloom. This yellow one with the reddish center is a strawberry lemonade, and then we also have a really dark burgundy one, and this one is called Moulin Rouge. Such a gorgeous dark burgundy color, and some of them are so dark they almost look chocolatey. By the way, a little update on the Irish Spring soap that we've put around this flower garden to keep the deer away. I don't think we've had any extra deer damage, but this could just be because it's the middle of summer and they have other food sources. So I'm not gonna 100% say that this is keeping them away, but at the very least I don't think it hurts, and it's a really easy thing to try if you do have a lot of deer pressure in your garden. So now we're gonna move on to the other row of this garden, and in this back area, first we have some yarrow. The first few plants are a Colorado Yarrow, which is a more colorful pastel mix, and these do keep putting on new stems because I keep them very well picked. The white Yarrow, on the other hand, there is just too much for me to keep up with, so it has started to go to seed and is looking really brown and sad. But I think I'm actually going to leave this in here for all throughout the winter because the birds might like to eat the seeds, and it also just does a really good job keeping the weeds down in this area. So for now I'm going to leave this, and in early spring I can cut it back, and since it is a perennial for us, it will grow again next year with some new stems. Next to that, we have another little area that we planted up in that video that I mentioned, and here we have some new Yarrow seedlings. These are more of the Colorado mixed ones since I really liked those ones, and these overwinter so wonderfully for us. We also have an area where we seeded honeywort, but those haven't come up yet. We have a couple more of those Moulin Rouge sunflowers, and it just looks so beautiful with the golden hour light in the background. It really brings out those like fiery kinds of tones. And this is one of the ones that I mentioned that is so dark, it really kind of just looks brown. Another little patch of white yarrow, and then we have my precious floret seed dahlias that are just starting to open. I have a couple in the front here that don't look like they're blooming yet, but I have had some other ones open up in the past few weeks. Here's one of them that has these really beautiful rounded petals. I absolutely love the gorgeous peach tones, and this is probably one of my favorite ones so far. There's another one that has been a fiery red one and has been really stunning. It's not blooming right now, but I did get a picture of it when it was in full bloom. Then we have this super layered fluffy white one. This looks pretty close to a ball type dahlia, and they are really gorgeous, but unfortunately I haven't really been able to enjoy most of them because as soon as they bloom, they kind of turn brown or the bugs eat them up. So hopefully later in the summer when the bugs and the humidity are down a little bit, I'll be able to enjoy these a little more. I have another one that looks like it would be super gorgeous, but again, I haven't really been able to see many of them in full bloom because they just get eaten up. This one's really interesting because the outer petals are very sparse, and then it has a really fluffy center that kind of reminds me of those Cinderella peach zinnias. A very interesting shape, so hopefully I can get a picture of these one day. Nestled in between these dahlias, I have a bunch of Thai basil, and the reason they're planted on top of each other is because I thought this Thai basil was completely dead by our late frost, but somehow it survived and it is doing amazing. It is so much taller than the lemon basil on the other side, and I have no idea why because the soil again is kind of terrible. And they're planted so closely with the dahlias, but somehow they're just doing really amazing here, and I am all about it. These flowers have the same shape as the other basils, but they have more of a purple tone, so it's really nice to have different options when working with different color palettes. I have an empty area where I've cut out some statice and carnations, and I just need to come in here and sow some of that cover crop. I have a couple more of those Thai basil plants, and again, looking amazing, even better than the ones in our vegetable garden this year. I have no idea why. We do still have just a couple of statice plants that look like they're still putting on new stems, so I've just left those in for now, and I've also been drying a lot of these as well. We have another succession sowing of zinnias here from when we pulled out a bunch of spring stuff. We just direct sow these right into the ground. Zinnias are super easy to do that with, so it was just a really nice way to fill in this space. And I've just come here the other day and pinched the tops of these stems off. So you can see those two little sets of leaves where it's going to start branching off and creating a bushier plant. Then we have our large patch of Snapdragons, which kind of took a little break in the hottest parts of July, but I feel like they're starting to bloom a little bit better now. We had maybe a week of cool weather, and they look kind of like those cooler temperatures. I have a bunch of different varieties here and all sorts of different colors. In general, I've just been a little bit disappointed with the Snapdragons this year though, because I just feel like they haven't been producing too many stems that are usable, and I'm still having the trouble with these little bugs crawling all over the flowers, so I haven't really picked too many of these. I'm hoping that sometime soon those little beetles are going to go away for the year and I can actually enjoy these in bouquets. But at the very least, they are starting to look a lot nicer in the garden. We have another little area where we've direct sown more zinnias, just a different mix of things. And then we also have a couple of strawberry blonde calendula. These are starting to go to seed, and I'm just going to let them reseed. Calendula is a really good reseeder. And that brings us to the end of this garden tour. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing some of the successes and also some of the failures of this garden. This is our first year in this space and we are brand new to flower gardening, so we're learning as we go along. I hope you guys will join us and we'll see you again in the next video.